or the marijuana. It was rumored if you smoked it, it gave you superhuman strength and you became a bloodthirsty murderer. In El Paso, 2 men said a Mexican attacked them after he used killer marijuana. Moving swiftly, the mayor of El Paso banned the possession of marijuana. While the law was for marijuana, it gave El Paso a reason to control the Mexicans. The El Paso ordinance passed in 1914. Most Americans had never heard of marijuana. Instead of helping drug addicts with their problems, the U.S. government put it in the hands of the Treasury Department, in which they created the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Each state had to control marijuana on their own. Only 9 states signed. The other 39 considered it interference within their state. Alaska and Hawaii had become part of the U.S. yet. Meanwhile, marijuana started arriving in port cities like New Orleans. It was popular with music, and from New Orleans it made its way north. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics saw this as an opportunity to draw the states together to have one agreed-upon law against marijuana. At this point, the U.S. government said if you smoke marijuana, you will go insane, and Reefer Madness was made in 1936. The propaganda campaign was successful, and all the other states signed on. Without debate, scientific inquiry, or political objection, the Marijuana Act was passed, which made it illegal to possess marijuana in the U.S. unless the Treasury Department gave you a certificate that they never passed out. Overnight, a new class of criminal was made, and this was 1937. The U.S. government said marijuana is the worst narcotic known to man. Mayor LaGuardia wanted to get the facts to why marijuana was doing so much harm. He put together a study to find what marijuana does to you after you smoke it. After 6 years, they found out marijuana doesn't lead to any violent behavior or antisocial behavior. This study reversed everything Harry Anslinger has said about marijuana and its effects. Harry Anslinger was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. A furious Anslinger discredited the report, and since he controlled the marijuana, no more was used for further research. Anslinger ordered his men to dig up dirt on anyone who disagreed with his policy on marijuana. Anslinger targeted the entertainment business, which he saw as the low degenerate class. If a movie had the wrong idea with marijuana, Anslinger had it banned. From 1937 to 1947, the U.S. government spent $220 million fighting marijuana. Official replacement truth now said that if you smoke marijuana, you'll become a heroin addict. Smoking marijuana was a stepping stone to becoming a heroin addict in 1951. They said that the U.S. government said that Red China is now flooding the U.S. with drugs, and they're the reason the U.S. has a teen addiction problem. Since China became a communist in 1949, no politician could look soft against communism. President Truman signed the Boggs Act in 1951, which dramatically increased the penalty and started mandatory sentences. The Marijuana Control Act, which passed in 1956, put marijuana in the same category as heroin and made it subject to the same penalty. In Missouri, a second conviction could get you life. In 1961, at the United Nations, Anslinger persuaded the rest of the world to criminalize marijuana use, and the Single Convention on Drug Use was passed in 1961. From 1948 to 1963, the U.S. government spent $1.5 billion in the war on marijuana. Now the government was saying if you smoked it, you will withdraw from reality, lose all motivation, and undermine national security. On campuses across the country, students are experimenting with marijuana. People were starting to speak up about marijuana, and the dangerous perception about marijuana was starting to change. The new commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Henry Giordano, said he had a major problem once hippies hit the scene. And then it was said if you smoke marijuana, all motivation for life will be lost and you will become a dysfunctional loser. The public demanded to know more, and for the first time the government approved federal testing for marijuana. The study found out marijuana makes people happy, intoxicated, and sleepy. Richard Nixon built his campaign on law and order. Nixon launched Operation Intercept, the biggest non-war-related operation ever. In it, 2,000 custom agents were deployed at the Mexican borders. Their orders were to stop all marijuana from coming into the United States. No marijuana was ever seized. More determined to stop marijuana, Nixon threw money into the training and being able to spot marijuana users. As arrests skyrocketed, minorities were no longer the only ones being bullied. Most of the people serving time were white middle-class teenagers. Crow, a soldier in Vietnam, was caught selling marijuana to an undercover agent. He received 50 years for less than 1 ounce. As parents wondered why their children were in jail, they saw the problem wasn't marijuana, but marijuana laws. In 1970, Congress passed the Controlled Substance Act, which removed mandatory sentences and eliminated extremely harsh possession laws. From 1964 to 1969, the U.S. government spent $9 billion in the war on marijuana. Nixon used entertainment figures such as Elvis Presley to fight the war on marijuana. The enormous cost of outlawing marijuana outweighed any value of the law. Nixon threw out his report on marijuana without ever reading it. He did the exact opposite of what he was recommended and declared an all-out war on drugs. His weapon was the DEA, a super drug agency. Employing over 4,000 agents, the DEA had the authority to get wiretaps, enter homes without authority, and gather intel on normal, hard-working people. Now, with adults starting to use marijuana in the 70s, it was no longer a teenage addiction issue. John Sinclair received 10 years for 2 joints. John Lennon made a song for Sinclair, and Sinclair was later released. The city of Ann Arbor, Michigan passed a bill decriminalizing marijuana to the violation equal of a traffic ticket. This was passed in 1972. A year later, Oregon became the first state to completely decriminalize marijuana. A study in Oregon 4 years afterwards showed there was no increase in marijuana use, and they had saved a tremendous amount of tax dollars. By that time, 10 other states, including North Carolina, had already decriminalized marijuana. Jimmy Carter favored the decriminalization of marijuana. He wanted to end all federal penalties for marijuana under an ounce, leaving the states free to make their own marijuana laws. From 1970 to 1977, the U.S. government spent $76 billion on the war on marijuana. Dr. Peter Bourne, Jimmy Carter's chief drug advisor, gets caught using cocaine. Jimmy Carter could no longer appear to be soft on drugs. His proposal to decriminalize marijuana would die with Congress. Ronald Reagan came into play, and the Anti-Abuse Act in 1986 was soon signed. Principals could strip search students, assets would be seized, and drug testing was mandatory for all federal employees. George Bush Sr. said that all drug pushers should be given the death penalty, and the Just Say No Act started, along with the eggs frying, saying this is your brain on drugs. From 1980 to 1998, the U.S. government spent $214 billion in the war on marijuana. The U.S. government continues its war against marijuana when the people don't want it. I will end today with a quote from Mel LaGuardia, which was the mayor of New York, if you already know, a long time ago. Prohibition cannot be enforced for the simple reason that the majority of American people don't want it enforced. And with the, And with that being said, so the only thing to do under our government is to abolish a law that cannot be enforced and that the people of this country don't want to be enforced. I hope I've educated you on the history of marijuana and gained your vote, maybe, on why you should legalize it. Because the turnaround alone, economically, would help this country out a lot. Nonviolent criminals would stop being put in jail for petty charges, and it's a new way of life. People all around the world have been using marijuana for thousands of years, and there's no reason that it should still be illegal in this country. Thank you. I hope you have a good day.